Hello, and welcome to the Little Church World. Today's sermon is all about the adventure of obedience. Now, a lot of people in the world today have an issue with obedience, and you may ask, why? Well, a definition of obedience from the Oxford Dictionaries online says it's a compliance with an order, request, or law, or submission to another's authority. So basically, if we are to be obedient, we have less control over our lives, and we have to trust in someone or something else for the plan they have for us. However, obedience is crucial in Christianity. Obedience is how we show our love to God, and obedience is really key. It's worship on a whole new level. Now, of course, we can worship in many means. We can sing, we can praise the Lord, but obedience is on a whole new level, even compared to sin and worship. In John 15:10, it says, "If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept in the Father's command and remain in his love." Now, God wants us to be obedient with all our hearts. He doesn't want half our heart, he wants all our heart. And if we give all our heart in obedience to him, he will open all sorts of doors in our lives. Now, some people will say that, well, to be obedient, we must be able to hear him. And if God spoke to me, then I will do what he tells me, and I will be obedient. So what happens if you struggle to hear from God? Well, first we must start to obey what it says in the Bible. When we start living the way it says in the Bible, we will start hearing from God. I believe another reason we struggle to hear from God is because we need to build a strong relationship with God and spend time with him. I'm pretty certain in your everyday life, with the people you hold dear and the people you love, you give them time. You speak to them. You spend time with them. You don't just say something like, "I want this," and then walk off. So if you want something from God and you want to hear from him, then pray, spend time with him, but wait and listen from him. That is the key. Give him time to respond to your requests, to your questions, to your desires. If you do not spend time with him, you won't hear him because you should be too busy living your life instead of listening to him. In my own personal journey, I too have struggled to hear from God. I have for many years, but I truly believe one of the main reasons for this is because I didn't spend any time with God. So you need to find some time to spend with him. And trust me, it does work. But the problem is we all lead busy lives, so how do we find times? Well, some people will find the best way to do it is in quiet time and prayer and then listen with no distractions. While when I tried to do that myself, I kept falling asleep. So obviously that time didn't work for me. Other people, it might be doing mundane tasks like taking the dog for a walk, or just walking in the outdoors, or going to the gym, or going for a drive, or just doing something to where you're just waiting to hear from God. It really doesn't matter what it is, as long as it works for you. But give God the time to answer your prayers and your requests. And if you're able to hear him, then of course it'd be much easier to obey him. Another reason why I think people find it difficult to be obedient is because in our society today, we are very individualised. We live in a very self-centred and selfish world. It's normally all about what is my calling? What plans do you have for me? Where should I live? What should I do for work? And if God tells me what I should do, I will obey. Well, the thing is, our calling, it shouldn't matter where we are. It shouldn't matter what we're doing. It should always be obedient to God. So what we need to think about is be less self-centred and think what we can do where we are now. So the question I give you is, instead of what should I do, it should be, are we serving the people where we are? Are we loving the people where we are? Are we telling about God where we are at this time? The key to obedience is not hearing God. The key to hearing God is being obedient. Too many Christians waste too much time living in what the future might be, instead of hearing and obeying God for today. We are called to obey in the mundane, in the common everyday things, when no one is looking. Because if we obey in the mundane, it prepares us for obeying for spectacular things. And examples are in the Bible of obeying in spectacular fashion. An example of this in the Bible is Moses parting the Red Sea. Moses had just saved the Israelites from the Egyptians, following the 10 plagues. But after the Pharaoh had agreed to release them, he changed his mind and decided to chase after the Israelites with all his army. The Israelites were trapped between the Red Sea and the entire Egyptian army. And in Exodus 14:15-16, it says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water, so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry land.'" Now it's important to remember that the Egyptians wasn't just one man and his dog chasing them. In verse 7 it says 600 of his best chariots, along with all the chariots of Egypt with officers all over them, were chasing them. So it wasn't just one man and his dog, it was a whole army. And Moses was standing there, listening to God, and God said, "Put your staff into the sea and the waters will part." Now if that didn't work out, Moses would have been in a spot of bother with the Israelites. But he didn't doubt God, he obeyed God, and because of that, he showed glory for God. And not only did he save the Israelites from the Egyptians, but he showed the great power that God has. We also must be prepared to obey in the ridiculous. Example, this is Noah and the ark. Now the ark wasn't exactly small. It was about 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. But in Genesis 6:13-14, it said, "So God said to Noah, 'I am going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood. Make rooms in it and coat it with pitch inside and out.'" Now that is rather a big ask. It wasn't some small little boat. It was a big vessel. But then God also said in Genesis 6:17, "I am going to bring flood waters on the earth to destroy all life under the heavens, every creature that has the breath of life in it. Everything on earth will perish." What did Noah do? He obeyed. Even though there was no signs of flood water, he obeyed. And it took him many, many years to build that vessel, to build the ark. And I'm sure people around him probably mocked him. They probably thought, "What is he doing, building this great vessel when there's no floods at all? He must be mad," they probably said. But he obeyed. And by obeying, God showed him favour. And he saved his family as well as Noah and obviously all the animals as well. We have to also be prepared to obey in the extreme fashion. An example of this is Abraham and Isaac. Now God promised Abraham a special land that would belong to millions of his descendants. And when Abraham's father died, God told Abraham to leave where he was, to leave the country he knew, and go to a land that God had promised him. When Abraham was 99 and his wife Sarah was 90, they still had no children. So how were they going to have millions of descendants? But then the Lord appeared to them, and the Lord said that Sarah would give them a child. More importantly, give them a son. But how could God fulfill his promise of a son and millions of descendants at their age? I'm pretty certain back then IVF was not around. So the only way was by the power of God. And God kept his promise. When Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 91, they had a son, and they called him Isaac. But then God decided to test Abraham, to see how much Abraham loved his God and was willing to obey. In Genesis 22, 1-2, it says, Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, who you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Now, anyone out there with children must know what a difficult choice this would be. There was Isaac, a son that Abraham had been waiting many years for, that God had promised him, and the only way that he would have millions of descendants. And there was God, his beloved God, who he's always obeyed. Suddenly he turned around and said, "Abraham." "Yes, Lord." "You know that son of yours?" "Yes, Lord." "The son you love, the son you waited many years and I gave to you?" "Yes, Lord." "Well, I want you to kill him for me." What a difficult question to ask. For any parent, they must know the heartache that must be felt in Abraham's heart at that time. But what did Abraham do? He obeyed. He obeyed God, and what happened in return? Just as Abraham was about to sacrifice Isaac, the Lord told him to stop. He told him to stop because he proved that he was going to obey everything the Lord said in his life. So what happened after this great event? Well, Isaac went on to have 2 sons, and one was called Jacob. Jacob became the father of 12 sons, who became the ancestral fathers of the 12 tribes which made up the nation of Israel. And many years later, this resulted in Abraham having millions of descendants. But to be obedient, you must have faith. That's what Abraham had. He had faith that whatever God told him to do, it was for good. But you see, faith is difficult at times. And sometimes it will feel like faith is like jumping off a diving board into an empty swimming pool. We may say, "Lord, put water in the pool and I will dive." But the Lord may say, "No, dive and trust by the time you get to the bottom, I would have put water in the pool." So the question is, are you ready to be obedient? Are you ready to trust God and to have faith? Because you see, God will challenge you in every area of your life, and he will also challenge you in the areas you struggle with most. He will challenge you in the area that you find it hardest to obey, and that could be anything. It could be money, it could be relationships, it could be public speaking, it could be any facet of your life that you find difficult and you don't like letting go. He might challenge you to obey in that area. So you might ask, why does God challenge us in areas that we struggle? Well, a thing to remember is that God will never challenge you with something that you can't cope with. He does this to show you that if we are obedient and that we put faith in him, he will be faithful to us. And in return, we will see miracles. An adventure of obedience is never really an adventure if there is no risk. But obedience will set you free. So trust in God, have faith, and remember the promises he has kept in the past, however unlikely or impossible they seemed. I hope you enjoyed this message. If you are not a Christian yet, or if this message has touched your heart and you have any questions, please feel free to contact us on admin@thelittlechurchworld.org. We have plenty of resources and people you can contact in order to answer any questions or help you on your journey. But in the meantime, thank you for watching and God bless.